Alright boys, Bill dropped another encrypted order. Serial number incoming. Let's crack it. 1 5 0 1 1 2 1 3 1 6 1 4. We gotta build fast, and we gotta build dirty. You know the drill. We're working off of the cipher sheet to decode Bill's latest order. It's a bit outdated, sure, but it still tracks close enough to what he'd won. Starting with the body, code 15. That's Carapaced. Smooth shell, rounded plating, should help deflect a few shots from the Dominion when they start poking around again. Ricochets buy time, and time buys distance, so let's get to it. The Dominion's been closing in on Bill for a while now, so direct communication isn't an option anymore. If we want to keep Ashchain's efforts moving forward, we've got to rely on the usual system. One encrypted serial number, no clarifications, no back and forth. The cipher gives us the basics, sure, but it's up to us to figure out what those numbers actually mean and how to make sense of them on the bench. I'm hoping this log reaches you when the mech gets delivered and clears up enough to help you keep things rolling on your end. I'm just the one piecing it together, and how it's used is your call. Just make sure you find this message before the Dominion does. It won't be around long. Now that you know the situation, here's what I settled on for the body. With the Dominion outgunning just about everyone, I figured the best approach was layered defense. Curved plating stacked up to help deflect whatever comes our way. It's not about stopping a direct hit, it's about glancing the shot, buying time, and keeping the mech mobile. I pulled a few rounded panels from old gear, smelly but usable, and overlapped them across the back like scaled armor. Bill has a strict no 3D printed parts policy. Meanwhile, the Dominion is out there using advanced fabrication services like it's standard practice. Must be nice having proper prototyping resources such as PCBWay. PCBWay offers CNC machining, sheet metal fabrication, 3D printing, and full PCB assembly. Rapid turnaround, high precision, and custom prototyping make them the go-to for advanced builds. The Dominion relies on them, and we would too if we could. Next, I started on the head. The cipher gave us code 01, Lockjaw. That could mean a few things, but I took it as a call for something secure and tamper-resistant. The housing is heavy and reinforced, built to keep whatever is inside locked down tight. The outer shell is dense, with layered metal surrounding the sensor array to absorb damage and keep the system stable under fire. It is not built for elegance. It is built to stay sealed no matter what hits it. We don't have much in the way of advanced gear, since we're working out of the shadows with whatever we can scavenge, so a basic compound camera array is mounted on the front of the head, and I reinforced the lower section with parts pulled from old construction machinery to give it some extra armor. Since it's hard to find, well, anything that the Dominion hasn't already grabbed, most of the mech is held together with cheap instant welds. They'll hold, but in a few spots, we used a bit of photonic welding where it could actually make a difference. The head plate had a large hole in the bottom, and this was the fastest way to patch it without compromising the structure. The new armor plate makes a decent hiding spot for some extra electrical components, which should keep them a lot safer than leaving them exposed. Unfortunately, the antenna array still has to be mounted on the outside. There's no way around it. We don't exactly have access to high-end comms gear that can transmit without something sticking out. Next on the build order is the arms. From the cipher, we have a code of 12, which translates to triple-jointed. not exactly standard, and honestly, I wasn't sure what to make of it at first. 3 pivot points per arm adds complexity, but it also opens up a lot of movement potential. Since this unit is built with mobility in mind, the extra articulation could actually be an advantage. It might allow for better maneuvering in urban environments, whether that means climbing structures, pulling itself through narrow gaps, or keeping balance during fast movement. The frame will need reinforcement at each joint, but the added flexibility should actually be worth it. Due to the increased mechanical movement and power demands, each arm is equipped with a supplementary engine to handle the articulation. The forms are built around reinforced high-caliber barrels that will serve as launch systems, though we will cover the projectiles later in more detail. Between the joints, the focus is on strength and durability, so I used solid, blocky components to keep everything rigid and stable. Once the general frame was assembled, I began adding functional components. A microcontroller was installed on the engine to regulate energy flow throughout the arm, keeping input and output balanced during operation. After that, the rest of the frame was reinforced with additional systems and armor to support the kind of high-stress movement that this unit is expected to handle, especially if it ends up in parkour-heavy situations. Designing an arm that might carry the weight of multiple vehicles is far from ideal, so I reinforced it as much as possible without sacrificing the mobility. The added rotation and braking at each joint will also generate a significant amount of heat, so a large cooling array was mounted to the back of the upper arm segment near the microcontroller in order to help manage thermal buildup. Relying solely on a few motors or servos would be pushing our luck, so I added linear dampers to help manage the stress. One is installed at the elbow, and the other is installed at the other elbows? What do you even call those? Regardless, a few auxiliary vents were added near each joint to provide some extra cooling and exhaust. To protect the joints, a reinforced cover was added around each connection to shield the underlying hardware from impact and wear. A broad circular plate was also mounted at each limb base to strengthen the transition point and reduce the chance of direct hits damaging the joint during movement or collisions. The final elbow was installed in reverse to make space for a mounted winch. Its purpose ties into the projectile system, which I'll have to explain in more detail later. While focusing on the many elbows, I nearly overlooked the shoulder, which will need to carry the full weight of the arm. It uses oversized rotors with integrated braking discs, forming a sturdy layered assembly. Once slotted into position, the entire joint is secured with a solid weld for stability. Next up is the hands. The cipher gave us code 13, marked as hook. That's one of those entries that leaves a lot open to interpretation. I could have gone literal, but instead I went with something a little bit more flexible. Call it the Hyrule patterned variant of a grappling hook. Each hand is built like a clawed launcher with retractable cable routing through the forearm. Think of it like a scavenged version of those old grappling tools, but scaled up. Even if the system can't lift the whole mech, it'll give us more options for mobility, such as latching onto ledges, tripping enemy units, finding up weapons, or whatever else is needed. For a parkour chassis, that's a ridiculous upgrade. That brings us to the last piece of the build, the legs. The pelvis isn't its own component on the cipher sheet, and because of how integral it is in the function of the legs, I decided to include that here. The cipher gave us number 16, labeled weak. Out of everything on the sheet, this one's probably the most abstract to me. It doesn't make sense to build a fast, parkour-ready unit with legs that are meant to break. Or maybe that's not what it really means. I've taken it as a call for something light and stripped down. Less bulk, more freedom of movement. Instead of heavy plating, we're repurposing thinner, rusted material. Still solid enough to function, just not weighed down. This mech isn't meant for frontline combat. It doesn't need to stand and trade shots with a Dominion bot. It just needs to move fast and stay one step ahead. The leg frame uses the cleanest stock that I have, even if it looks thin. Each segment will have a bit of an air gap and some scrap armor in order to help deflect debris. Being lower to the ground, they might avoid direct fire, at least that's what I'm hoping for, especially if attention stays focused on the more heavily armored torso above. A tapered wire coil is wrapped and fitted as a spacer to offset the thigh angle slightly. This helps avoid contact with the pelvis before welding it in place. A salvaged electric motor housing was trimmed to form a protective cover along the back of the pelvis. Smaller, denser armor plates were fitted across the front, reinforcing the core system and providing balanced protection without adding excessive weight to the lower frame. Linear dampers, similar to those used in the arms, were integrated into the upper legs to provide extra support. As I continued working around the frame, I added reinforced armor around the knees and installed a socket at the base of each thigh to accommodate a piston that will be mounted later. For the feet, I needed separate pivoting toes and heels to handle uneven terrain and support agile movement. The toes were cut from a set of interlocking cubic components normally used in a complex rotating assembly. They were mounted to the heel and fitted with a brass bushing, which matches the other joints across the mech. To secure the ankle joint to the leg, I used photonic welding once again to get the strongest bond possible with what I had on hand. The scrap armor used on the legs shows sign of heat warping, which isn't too surprising given Ashchain's frequent use of pyrotechnic weaponry. Custom pistons larger than those previously used were built for the knees to improve running and jumping capability. Once installed, the joints were covered using the same reinforced shrouds and armor plating previously applied to the arm assemblies for consistent protection and structure. With enough space and spare armor available, I added extra protection to the thighs along with additional auxiliary vents near the hip joints. Armor was installed along the underside as a precaution, and the toes were reinforced with durable pivot pins to handle repeated stress during movement. We've got no shortage of battle-worn plates lying around, and most of them are too damaged for frontline use. But for something built to move and not necessarily to fight, they're good enough. Some already have burn bruise or impact damage, but they should still hold against small arms and shrapnel. The components are finally built, which means we can start bringing the frame together and get it standing on its own for the first time. Legs are locked into the hips, arms are mounted at the shoulders, the grappling hook assemblies are loaded, and the head with the built-in sensors and communications array is finally attached. It is rough, uneven in spots, it's still missing paint, but it holds together. From here, we can finally start turning this into something real. The Dominion may have the advantage when it comes to polished manufacturing, but they lack the kind of flexible thinking we rely on in the field. Take the chain winches, for example. Each one is loaded with heavy steel chain, tightly coiled and ready to deploy. The links are welded directly to the spools and to the grappling hook hands for a strong, reliable connection. To help them survive high-speed launches and repeated impacts, every chain is treated with a polymer coating that boosts durability without adding unnecessary weight to the system. The frame is finally fully assembled, with every part finding its place. No more guesswork, no more fitting pieces together. From this point forward, it's all about the finishing, the tuning, and getting ready to move. The last bit of the cipher is the number 14. That's for a flavor of dirty, whatever the heck that means. Not sure if that was meant to be a joke or a tactic, but I'm taking it as visual camouflage. Dominion bots don't flinch at garbage, so the more dust and dirt we've got on the mech, the more we look like background noise, and we will hopefully be harder to pinpoint, especially while sprinting around with grappling hooks. Before we worry about what the mech visually tastes like, we have to disassemble and prepare for at least a fundamental paint protection. Although the major components like the arms and legs are removed for priming, I tried to leave most systems intact so that I wouldn't have to waste as much time completely disassembling and reassembling every single bolt and nut. As for the paint itself, well, I just used whatever was lying around. It's not like we can go to the store and buy some special coating. The Dominion's got eyes in almost every Neo-City, and we'll have to make do with what's around us. Primer goes down first to protect the exposed metal and stabilize the surface. Some of the parts used in the build are already halfway to rust, and others were never meant to be used together in the first place. A solid primer coat helps to create a unified base layer that can handle heat, dust, and the vibration stress this unit will deal with once it starts moving. It also helps seal small gaps, uneven welds, and surface damage that could spread over time if left untreated. While it might not look like much, this is one of the more important steps. Without it, the next layers of paint would peel off under pressure, or they would burn off during live use in the field. After the primer sets, a muted slate purple is sprayed across the frame. It is not perfect, but it blends well enough into concrete and urban rubble. More importantly, it stands out just enough for other Ashchain crews to recognize it, without drawing too much attention from the Dominion patrols. Next up should be the unit stenciling, which normally goes... Hold on. I think I just saw something move past the window. Nothing obvious. Must have been the wind. If you're listening to this later, and something feels off, trust that instinct. Either way, I am not re-recording this. Now, where were we? Right. Moving on. Electroplating comes next. I'm coating the pistons, cables, and joint housings with a metallic finish to protect against friction and heat. It is not fully electroplating, because we don't have the resources for that right now, but the compound cures hard and it resists wear. These areas move the most and fail the fastest, so they get extra attention. Even just a thin coat helps reduce buildup from dust and grime. Anything that cycles or events needs to stay clean as long as possible. It might not be that pretty, but it keeps the leg from locking up mid-jump, so it's worth the effort. During some initial field tests, a few rough landings and wall impacts scraped up the surface more than expected. Nothing major, but enough to take the edge off of the paint. I'm leaving those marks in place. If it chipped that fast during trials, it's only going to get worse in the real conditions, and there's not much point in fixing it. Finishing work on a machine like this means building with the aftermath in mind. In the unregulated Neo-Cities, everything corrodes faster. Dust grinds into exposed seams. Acid rain eats through untreated surfaces. Nothing stays clean, and nothing lasts long unless you're expecting this from the start. Most of the damage shows up around the moving parts. Moisture seeps into the joints. Chains collect runoff from the upper frame. Heat-scarred plating starts to peel, and then rust blooms along the edges. It doesn't take that long. The Dominion might control maybe 80% of the Omniplex, but out here, the other 20 feels like a different planet. Filth builds up in layers. Most people stop noticing it, but the machines, they definitely notice. They seize, corrode, and snap under weight that clean infrastructure would absorb without any issue. So, no, this one is not going out polished. It's going out like it's been here before. Because if it's gonna survive, it's gonna have to look like it already has. No blueprint or backup, just one shot to get it moving. That's how we build in the Ashchain. If it makes it to the big bot bench, then it was worth it. Everything here lines up with Bill's orders, or as close as I could manage. You'll have to handle the rest. Good luck with the mech, it's yours now. Just make sure they remember who sent it. Looks like the archive just got a new initiate. We'll have to keep an eye on them.